All right, guys, welcome to Entry Point. I'm one of the analysts here, and I'm going to go over a long idea that I'm in right now, currently on AUDNZD. I want to just break down exactly why I'm in this trade from the fundamentals and also the technical side. So for me, this is not really just a random technical setup, right? This trade is really based on the bigger picture of what's actually causing this move. Just a couple of things, right? Mainly monetary policy divergence, relative macro strength, and the current broader market environment that we're in. So when I compare Australia and New Zealand side by side, Australia just simply looks stronger right now. First on the central bank side, the RBA is still relatively more hawkish. Rates in Australia are higher. Inflation is still sticky enough to keep the RBA cautious, right? So the market's still treating Australia as a stronger rate story. And on the other hand, New Zealand has a softer growth backdrop. And, while inflation is still an issue there as well, the RBNZ is in a much more difficult position because growth is a lot weaker. So they're taking a little bit more of a dovish stance, especially since the start of this year. So when I look at it, 280 definitely has a better monetary policy profile versus NZD, right? The second is really just the macro perspective. Australia's economy is still holding up better overall. Growth is firmer, the labor market is slightly healthier, and Australia has a lot more support from the community and China links side of the story. New Zealand, however, is kind of, it has a weaker leg in comparison. Growth has been softer, recovery has not been convincing. And that mark, it makes NZD less attractive relative to AUD, right? Realistically speaking. Move on into the market environment, right? Stocks have been stabilizing, volatility has come off a bit as well. When the market leans more risk on, or at least less defensive right now, AUD usually benefits more than NZD, and both are risk sensitive currency, yes, but AUD tends to attract a lot more flow when it trades. What traders want more exposure, right, to global growth, commodities, and broader risk appetite. So for me, this trade is really about relative strength. It's not necessarily that I'm aggressively bullish on everything Australia related. To be fair, I still feel that overall everything is just kind of flat. And then there's just a little bit of divergence that we can take action on. But when I do compare AD against NZD, it does seem like there's a lot more strength compared to NZD, right? Also currently, looking at just kind of talking a little bit more about the broader market aspect of things from the stock market, right? We're seeing Nasdaq basically being up for 12 days. We are rallying here and pretty much recovering almost everything that almost 100% here, about to hit the all-time highs, which is pretty crazy. Really a lot of that was drawn by really great earnings so far on the financial sector. Great forecasts as well. The VIX has took a pretty strong dive down in volatility. We can see a real strong gap down here, and right now we're basically below 20 on the VIX, right? We've been seeing a lot more improvements in the fundamental side as well for indexes. Showing some sort of positive economic data, right? We also know that PPI recently just came out 4% year on year, which is significantly lower than the forecasted 4.6%, despite the expectations of inflationary pressures from rising oil prices and obviously the Middle East conflict, right? Which is something I really want to talk a little bit about. I think a lot of people were, and myself included, got really confused. That's why trading is it's very tough, right? It's hard to read kind of what's going on, but basically, in short, we're shifting from extreme bearishness, right, to growing bullishness, right, with some residual bearish skepticism. Okay, um, but despite headlines of really the tension in the Middle East, ongoing negotiations is still between the U.S. and Iran. And Iran are still viewed as a positive signal by the market. As you can see, both sides have incentives to reach a deal to avoid any disruptions of oil supplies and inflationary spikes. The market's forward-looking nature really means many geopolitical risks may already be priced in, basically. Of course, anything can change. Right now we're in a very volatile market, regardless, in terms of Trump, what he wants to do. But just follow the market developments and price action rather than just to predict the outcomes, right? And what we're seeing is despite what others are saying, the market is actually moving a lot higher, right? And this can be tied to the drop in volatility. The DXY has also took a pretty strong dive here. US oil has is there pretty much down 1%. From its highs, from 8th of April, 7th April, we're basically down already about almost 30%. So, is it going to continue here? I don't know, but that's what's going on right now, and all of these kind of translates back to why I'm basically long in the AUD NZD trade. Hope that makes sense, but try to dumb it down as much as I can. But basically, that's kind of what's going on right now. We can also take a look at my indicator here that I use that I find very useful. It's from A1 Trading. You guys can check it out if you want. Not sponsored by them or anything, but I use this very heavily for my macroeconomic outlooks. And then it just helps to dumb things down a lot easier. I don't have to spend time researching. And basically, what we can see is that overall, oh, this is has completely shifted. There was a it was a bullish indicator here actually. Hold on, let me try to go back here. Yeah, bullish go 10. Basically, we have strong trend, strong seasonality, crowd sentiment, GDP, PMI, consumer confidence, PPI, interest rate. Overall, everything is kind of favoring AUDNZD right now. Um, Trying to get just a little bit of more in-depth information here if we can get it. Let's see. Okay, right now I think it's sort of updating here. Apologies about that, but we're still on a very bullish score. Overall, a lot more on the economic growth side compared to NZD. It's not that AUD is doing fundamentally amazing, but we have a lot more economic growth here. But it's not really popping up right now. But basically, yeah, these are this is one of the assets here that is doing really well in terms of bullish score. Um, So yeah, so based off that, I decided to take a long, ideally I would like to wait. The thing is, what we can see is that from a weekly standpoint, we're tapping into a weekly area of resistance here, right? So it makes sense for price to kind of have a little bit of a reaction at this point. But what we can see is that price did break out of that level pretty strongly. On top of that, price has also been uptrending really nicely. We've been above the 250-day moving average for quite a while now. I mean, since I want to say July last year, right after the tariff situation, and we've just been moving up ever since, right? Really kind of kind of shifting towards the bearish side on NZD really, and how it's just been really the case for quite a while now. And usually ideally I like to wait for price to really come into these key levels that I usually watch for longs. But what we can see is that it initially was pretty rangy. Like I said, there's a lot of range, just sort of indecision that we've been facing so far. But right now, what we can see is we just took out this high, and we do seem like we can potentially head higher here. So just taking a look, right? Currently, we're technically at that 50 area. We did go below. Technically, this is a valid trade. I wouldn't say it's the most higher risk, a higher probability setup when it comes to from the technical standpoint, but obviously everything is kind of driven by the fundamental side for me. The technicals is just really a place for execution only. And if we take a look at a 15-minute, what we can really see is clear sign of strength, right? Initially, obviously, like I said, we had a pretty big push down, which can be very worrying in most cases. But what we can actually see is that it's actually met with a rebound and a pretty strong rebound, I might add here. And so, that being said, here, I think overall there's a lot more of an opportunity here for longs. Um, I think we have a lot more of a strong move up, I would say. And I'm really, really curious to see what happens. Anything can really happen at this point. We can start pulling back. I do really expect a bit of a pullback here, but yeah, we'll see. Right now, really this entry here was, me waiting for price to see if we can come back to our key level. But what we can see is that same thing, kind of tapped that 50, tapped back into that area where it was last topped at, pulled back, and then what we can see is that actually price is kind of holding up this trend, okay? So, we're still, we're above VWAP, which is this white line here. On top of that, we're holding up this trend, right? So to me, I do see that there's a lot more bullish sentiment and bullish order flow coming into the market. And as soon as I bought, we started to see a strong push up, and now we're kind of just consolidating. But like I said, I do expect some sort of pullback. Maybe if I can take a look at where I think price will probably pull back into, maybe somewhere within this area here. I do expect some pullback towards this area. And from there, we kind of see whether price wants to respect this area or price wants to continue above. What I probably would do is if we don't get to see that push, I will probably de-risk this position. So if let's say we come back down and we're kind of moving at lower, I'll probably de-risk the position and take for a smaller loss or just close the position completely. So I think this is going to take some time for it to materialize. Markets are coming towards the end of the week, which is past midweek, and at the same time, I think the markets are a lot more stabilized now. We're not really seeing those kind of insane high volume moves. We're seeing a little bit less volume. Just looking at the Nasdaq right now, you can see descending volume or ascending chart, right, which shows that if a reversal is coming into the market, and usually when risk assets do reverse, we start to see a little bit of that kind of also going on with risk currencies. Same thing with AUDNZD. We're kind of seeing descending volume a little bit. We are almost approaching RSI as well, so it'd be interesting to see what plays out. But I still think that there's a lot more opportunity for higher prices. Main TP is right here, but I'll probably leave some for a little bit more. I'm really kind of anticipating potentially another bull run, like a lot of these trades that have been happening. I may just let it run and then just really see where it goes. But main thing is I'll probably go, I'll probably go break even or maybe de-risk once we're around this 121,691 level, and then I probably just see where it goes from there. Um, but yeah, so that's overall the trade idea. Please give a like, subscribe, and comment in any way where I can create more videos. Just support me, guys, and I'll definitely be happy to kind of go deeper into my strategy, deeper into how I trade, and possibly maybe even making a community as well, right? Of traders where we can share ideas, talk shop. But yeah, just let me know. Leave a comment on anything, what you think about a trade, any kind of comments that you feel that are necessary as well. Please go ahead. And yeah, all right. Take care, guys. Happy trading.